morning, folks. Good to see you today with us for the story behind the Psalms. Today we're in Psalms 54. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, John. How are you? Good morning, everybody.
Doing great. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Are you ready?
No.
No? Neither. So, all right, we're being honest.
Yeah.
Did you at least buy something for Sarah yet?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
You bet. This is the Sunday before Christmas, and we just want to wish you a very Merry Christmas. Hope
Merry
you
Christmas.
enjoy the abundance and the joy of Jesus coming into the world. I listened this morning on the way in, Roger, to one of my favorite bands sing "Joy to the World," and just driving in, I literally didn't stop driving, but I paused and in my own moment, in my own head, in the quietness of my truck, this is a time of joy.
Yeah.
Despite what else is going on, we can have joy as believers because we know that Jesus came into the world in Christmas, and he's still here. He's still reigning. He's still ruling. He still believes in the church, and we're excited about that. And that, in and of itself, gives us joy.
Amazing. And it's kind of amazing. We're both kind of in sync this morning because when I was driving in, I was listening to one of my favorite teaching pastors, and he was teaching on Mary and the Magnificat and Mary's prayer. And so, it was an awesome morning to listen to coming in too. And
Mary was quite raucous, wasn't she?
She was.
She was not the sweet little lady with the blue scarf.
No.
She was quite a rebel. But anyway, we digress and get far away from the Psalms. But thanks for joining us. We're in Psalms 54. Roger's going to jump us in, so Roger, take it away, man.
All right. Well, once again, everybody, we're starting in Psalm 54 this morning, if you got your Bibles, and we're going to go with the header, and then we'll go with the story behind the psalm. So this one is for the director of music with stringed instruments, a maskil of David, which remember we talked about last week. A maskil is a psalm that's supposed to teach you something. And then when the Ziphites had gone to Saul and said, "Is not David hiding among us?"
Ooh.
So let's go back and we'll find the story. So most commentators think that this story actually could be from Psalm 23 or 26, and almost everybody leans to 23. First Samuel. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So First Samuel. So if you flip back to the book of First Samuel, and we'll take the first two verses of 22 just to kind of set it up of what David was doing at the time. But remember, David fled to Adullam, and then that's where his band of merry men joined him. And in verses 1 and 2 of 22, it says, David left Gath and escaped to a cave, the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard of it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. So David's got this group of merry men that are with him, and they're the ones that are the outcasts from Saul's kingdom. They're in debt, they're distressed, all these different things. So they're with him. So we jump forward to Psalm 23, and David hears that this Judite town, because remember David's from the tribe of Judah, he's a Judite, and that this town, which is in the foothills of the province of Judah, where remember Joshua gave each tribe their land. So it's in the foothills of the tribe of Judah's land, is being attacked. And now,
let's just and paint a picture where that is. And I may even you see a map on the screen. That big swath in the middle. You have Jerusalem to the north, and you have the Dead Sea to the east, and then that whole swath of color is the tribe of Judah, and just Jerusalem is just north of the tribe of the land that was given to Judah. And then you have Jerusalem is just north, and then Bethlehem, and then down from Bethlehem is where the caves of Adullam are and all the region we're at today. And I think it's interesting, as you read in chapter 22 of Psalms, that David's family heard where he was and they went down to him. Literally, they went south. And I mean, it's accurate in the description of where they are. And I think it's just kind of cool to see that whole wilderness area, the wilderness of Zeph, as it's going to become called, that's kind of west of the Sea of Galilee. I mean, west of the Dead Sea and south of Jerusalem. Okay. I like knowing where I'm sitting.
Exactly, me too. It's a pilot thing. It's always good to know where you're at.
Yeah.
So David then it was told, look, the Philistines are, in verse 1, look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are looting the threshing floors. So kind of two different things there. One is that obviously that's how the people, that's their sustenance. The threshing floor meant all the grain that they had harvested that was going to be their food that they were going to store up is being taken away by the Philistines. So this is a dire situation. Mm-hmm. We're in an agrarian society. You don't have grain, you don't eat. You know, that's part of it. So it's a dire situation for the people. And think about this also. Who's the king at this point? It's King Saul. So who's supposed to be protecting the people? Saul. It's not David's job at this point to protect the people. It's Saul's job. So so David inquires of the Lord. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So he inquires of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go and attack these Philistines?" The Lord answered him, "Go and attack the Philistines and save Keilah." So David's men said to him, "Here in Judah we are afraid. How much more then if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces?" So they're already hiding out in the land of Judah. They know Saul is after David. And obviously they're enemies of the state also at this point. And so they're very afraid, and they're saying, well, you know, we're already out here in the bad area. How much more so if we go to a known place and we get into a fight? We're really going to be in trouble. And so once again, in verse 4, David inquires of the Lord, and the Lord answers him, "Go down to Keilah, and for I am going to give the Philistines into your hand." So David and his men went to Keilah. They fought the Philistines, carried off their livestock. He inflicted heavy losses on the Philistines and saved the people of Keilah. We get this really unique verse that you're like, why is this here? It's verse 6. And it says, "Now Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, had brought the ephod down with him when he fled to David at Keilah." Remember, that was our story from last week. Mm-hmm. And with Doeg the Edomite slaughtering all of the priests, and Abiathar was the one son of Ahimelech that survived. Mm-hmm. And so he is the lone sole Levitical priest from Nob that's left. And he has this ephod. And the ephod kind of, when you ask about David inquiring of the Lord, probably, and this is, and we'll talk about, you know, there's going to be a little bit more of the inquiry later of the Lord. But in the ephod, the priests had these things called the Urim and the Thummim, and we don't know what they are to this day, but they're described in the Bible, and most scholars think that they were either stones or gemstones that were polished. They were identical in shape, or they may even been bone or wood in the outlying areas, but two identical feeling pieces that the priest couldn't tell what they were. But he would reach into his ephod when he was asked a question from leadership and inquiring of the Lord. And if he could, he was supposed to be in front of the Ark of the Covenant when he did it. Mm-hmm. And so he'd reach in there and he would pull out a stone, and it could either mean guilty or innocent or yes or no. Very basic questions, mm-hmm. or answers, I should say, to the questions. And so when we get these inquire of the Lord, that's probably what it was, is that, you know, he went to Abiathar and asked him, and Abiathar said, "Okay, let me inquire of the Lord."
Reach in my pocket.
Reach in my pocket.
Go.
Yep, go. and so David did, and obviously God had already blessed his
very, very unceremoniously and possibly inappropriate to refer this to like the modern day Magic 8 Ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just be honest. It was just kind of a way to assume that God was working through the hand of the Levitical holy person priest reaching into the pocket and pulling out something. And again, the Urim and Thummim and the ephod, there's really very little evidence of what it is, and kind of what Roger and I are referencing here this morning is just kind of what's been put together from scratch pieces, mm-hmm. to try to figure it out. So we're really not quite sure, but that's just a best guess.
Yeah. And in that practice in Judaism and the rabbinical writings was abandoned during the Second mm-hmm. Temple period. So it's not used anymore in Judaism. It's not after that time period, it kind of gets dropped for whatever reason.
Probably got a lot of wrong answers.
Yeah, probably did.
But
not of the best motives.
But it was trustworthy then, and I think that's what we have to. We look back on that today, and we go, I will confess, at least kind of scoff at it a little bit. But we got to think that this is one of the primary ways that David was seeking the direction of the Lord, and so he trusted in it. His men trusted in it, and I think we have to honor that in some sense. The significance that David wanted it brought along, that David wanted it there. But I think it's an insightful look into the life of how these folks reached out to God.
Yeah. The biggest takeaway from verse 6 that I want you to take away, though, is the fact that who now has the Levitical support? Is it Saul or is it David? Mm-hmm. David is the one, after Saul had the priests slaughtered, David is now the one who the Levites are behind. Mm-hmm. So that's the big takeaway is,
sure.
Now he's got the priestly support.
Right.
All right. So then Saul, the next heading of when you continue down to 1 Samuel, Saul pursues David. So Saul was told that David was at Keilah, and he's like, yes, God's delivered him into my hand. And so because Keilah is a walled city, and Saul felt, oh, hey, I can trap him within the walls. The people hand him over to me. I got this. This is good. And that's probably what the angst of David's men were too. Obviously, they knew that.
Right.
And so David once again learns that Saul is going to pursue him. So he says, bring the ephod again, and inquires of God. And the Lord comes back to him, and he says in verse 10, Lord God of Israel, your servant has heard definitely that Saul has plans to come to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me to him? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? Lord God of Israel, tell your servant. And the Lord answered, he will.
Again, that short answer probably referencing to him reaching in and finding the rock that is the positive answer, or the stone that is the pot. God does not go into a long expose, just a real short answer. Yes, So
then David asks again, will the citizens of Keilah surrender me and my men to Saul? They will.
Yeah.
So yes, the affirmative again. So David and his men, by now it says, so we had 400 in chapter 22, now we're up to 600. David and his men, about 600 in number, he's gained some troops, left Keilah and kept moving from place to place. And when Saul was told that David escaped from Keilah, he did not go there. So David stayed in the wilderness. They said he moves from place to place, and he goes to the desert of Ziph.
Woohoo! Bum, bum, bum.
Yep, bum, bum, bum. And day after day, in verse 14, day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. So David once again learns while he's out there in the desert of Ziph that Saul's coming for him again. And we get the final account of David meeting with Jonathan. Mm-hmm. Jonathan, Saul's son, obviously, who is one of the princes, would travel with his dad, the king. And actually, Jonathan's the oldest, so he'd be the second in command. So the second in command is out there. And he somehow, we don't know, but he gets to meet with David. He finds him. So they meet, and Jonathan tells, let's start there. Verse 16, Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel. So, Jonathan's abdicating the throne over to him. Mm-hmm. You'll be king of Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, but David remained in Horesh. So the political intrigue is still there. Yes. Jonathan pledges his allegiance, a new covenant. He says that's part of the whole thing, is Saul knows ultimately that David's the anointed king, the next anointed king. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of the dark moods, part of the evil within Saul. All right, so then the Ziphites go to Saul at Gibeah. And now, this is kind of interesting because they're so specific. They tell him exactly where he's at. Mm-hmm. So the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, is not David hiding among us in the strongholds of Horesh, on the hill of Hakilah, south of Jeshaman? Now, your majesty, come down whenever it pleases you to do so. and we will be responsible for giving him into your hands. So, John, in your research, you have a good theory on why the Ziphites might have been allied with Saul and why they may have been so willing to give up David.
Yeah, that was the question that I walked away from this encounter is, why if we're in the region of the tribe of Judah, which is David's people, why would the Ziphites give David up to Saul, the evil king? And I went and did some digging, and you can Google. I mean, what I have access to, you have access to, and I found that Ziph, the people of the town of Ziph, means smelters. Not the fish. They're not the fish.
They're in the desert.
They're in a desert. Yeah, remember that. They're in a desert. And smelters, which means the making of metal, softening of metal. And so these people probably had some type of smelting or factory resource in their town. And so what was in this culture, in this time period, what was metal used for? Metal, it was just the very beginnings of metal being used for currency, but it was very prevalently, metal was used for encasing wood in metal for weapons and for war implements, for battle implements. So the Ziphites were most likely supplying Saul and his armies with all their battle implements, the swords, the shields, whatever they used, buckles for sandals, wheels, rims for the chariots, all that kind of stuff that you would think would be metal. The smelters, arrowheads, the smelters were probably doing that for Saul, and so their livelihood was based on, from their perspective, keeping Saul in power.
Yeah.
And so this rebel force coming through their town, maybe even coming to them for some weapons, because when David was in the cave of Adullam, and with those 400 men at the beginning, really the only weapon other than the agrarian tools those 400 men had was the sword of Goliath. Mm-hmm. For he got from Gath. And so they needed some weapons if they were going to defeat the Philistines. And so the David and his entourage could have been putting pressure on the Ziphites. Hey, your family, you need to cut us a deal. You just give a family discount on these weapons. So they were maybe getting some pressure from David. They were obviously supplying something to Saul and his kingdom. And so it was just easier to give them up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's just a theory, my theory, from putting together kind of what I researched from looking up. Because that's the question I walk away with. Mm-hmm. Why would somebody in your family want to give you up?
Yeah. And it's the same, well, as Solomon says much later, there's nothing new under the sun. It's the same thing that we have today. For money, people are willing to betray people. Mm-hmm. That's, they see prosperity and they're willing to
see money, or to keep things the same. Don't mess with my way of life.
Yeah.
Don't mess with the good thing I got going, David. You're trouble. You're rabble rousers. You got all these people that owe me money. They're bad, that just go away, and I'm gonna turn you into Saul. So that's my theory.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then in verse 21, Saul comes back, and he's actually very, he's got this mock self-centered concern, and he's very, Saul replies, the Lord bless you for your concern for me. Go and get more information. Find out where David usually goes and who has seen him there. They tell me he is very crafty, which, he's...
We told you exactly where he is.
Right, exactly. He's very crafty. Find out about all the hiding places he uses and come back to me with the definite information.
Yeah, he is on this hill in this little city, but you want more information.
Yeah, and then when you do that, then I will go with you if he's in your area, and I will track him down among the clans of Judah. So actually, too, you can tell Saul's got some fear of the situation as well. I mean, he's going to go against 600 men who've already been proven in battle against the Philistines. So, he's got to think about that as well. So Saul, and then it's kind of funny. So, like John and I were talking, it's like an old Western movie, verse 26.
Yeah.
Saul's going on one side of the mountain, David and his men were on the other side, hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul saying, "Come quickly, the Philistines are raiding the land." Then Saul broke off the pursuit of David and went to meet the Philistines, and that's why they call the place Selah Hamakoloth. That's my best. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-gedi, which is another very desert area. But it's interesting that the Selah Hamakoloth is translated as the rock of separations or divisions, or it separated them. So there's the backstory.
Very cool.
Behind the psalm.
Very cool. So David gets away, goes to En-gedi. En-gedi's you look up, Google En-gedi on. It's kind of a beautiful up there at the edge of the Dead Sea. Lots of caverns. You could hide out.
Yeah. It's a brutal landscape.
Yeah.
I mean, you could best I could liken it to is maybe Utah.
Badlands.
The Badlands. I mean, it's kind of
it's kind of rough area, and that's where David goes, and Saul goes to fight the Philistines, and so. So just kind of breezing through here the next couple of chapters, because you have the Ziphites one more. In 24, you have that great story of where Saul goes into a cave. It says to relieve himself, wink, wink, and David comes up behind him and cuts off an edge of his garment. Could have killed him, didn't, and then David kind of calls him out from across a wadi. That, hey, Saul, I could have killed you. Obviously, I'm not out to harm you.
Mm-hmm.
And Saul repents. I think he feigns repentance. He acts like, I'm so sorry, David. Please forgive me. And then you have the story again. The other time the Ziphites give out David is in 26.
Yeah, that's a fun one too.
Yeah, another great story where Saul and his armies are sleeping, and it says they're in a deep sleep, and David and one of his assistants literally walks up, takes Saul's shield, his spear, takes Saul's spear and his water jug, like his canteen, and walk back out of the camp, and then again hold him up on the other side of the wadi and say, hey, again, I could have killed you, but I didn't. So stop chasing me. Exactly. This is not between me and you, Saul. We're trying to work together to do good for the people of God. You don't need to be chasing me and trying to kill me. And so, again, the Ziphites gave up David again in that story. But that's where we come back to Psalms 54, where, as Roger said, I think most people who study these kind of things say that this psalm was written with that 1 Samuel 23 in mind, the first time that the Ziphites gave David up to Saul. And so it's only 7 verses. So let me just read it, and then we'll come back and kind of take it verse by verse and walk through and see what it has to say to us today in light of the 1 Samuel 23 story. Psalms 54. We've already read those opening comments. So verse 1, save me, O God. Save me by your name. Vindicate me by your might. Okay, remember David's talking about those people that gave him up. Saul's chasing him. They're hiding in the wilderness of Ziph. They're going between all of those lands. Vindicate me by your might. Hear my prayer, O God. Listen to the words of my mouth. Strangers are attacking me. Ruthless men seek my life. Men without regard for God. Surely God is my help. The Lord is the one who sustains me. Let evil recoil on those who slander me. In your faithfulness, destroy them. I will sacrifice a freewill offering to you. I will praise your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from all my troubles, and my eyes have looked in triumph on my foes.
So verse 1, entering the save me, O God, by your name. Vindicate me by your might. And then vindicate me goes back to Psalm 43:1, also uses that same thing. And it's David is using the same language that would be used in a courtroom. He's saying, vindicate me. You're the judge, hear my case, make sure that I'm righteous before you, that I'm not, I'm innocent, that I have no guilt in this matter.
Right.
So,
And I think it's in the grammatical sense, it's an imperative. I mean, here in a sense, David is giving God a command. I mean, that's the strength of which these words hold. He's, save me. Almost like you would think, somebody drowning, you're calling out to a lifeguard, save me, oh God. And it's the word Elohim there. It's not the name Yahweh that David uses later on in the psalm, but here it's save me, God. Literally, save me, God, by your name. Again, the significance of David calling out because we know his name. God's name is power. God's name is presence. And then as Roger said, vindicate me. Wipe me clean by your might, by your strength. And so David calls on two aspects of God here at the very beginning of the verse, wanting himself to be removed from the arrogance and the sin of, I think, the Ziphites. I think David is not lambasting Saul or Saul's kingdom at this point. I think David is specifically aggravated at the Ziphites. And so David is saying, God, save me from the words of these people by your name. Your name is I am that I am, Yahweh, I am that I am, the God who is present with us, the God who is present with me, present with his people. God, you are the one who is with us, so save me because of who you are, basically. And then vindicate me by your might, by your strength. God, you are powerful enough to do whatever you want to do. You have fought the battles of the Philistines with my 400 men and defeated them in 1 Samuel 23. I want to say Psalm 23 too. And so David is being a clear statement at the very beginning of what he expects God to do. Whether it's in a legal case, in a courtroom situation, you want the judge always in a courtroom to find in favor of you, or it's just a person out there in pain making a very strong prayer to God. Save me, God. Vindicate me. You know what's wrong. Save me by the strength of your name. Vindicate me by the power of your might. I think it's a pretty cool verse.
Yep.
And then he goes on in verse 2, hear my prayer, O God. Listen to the words of my mouth. Hear me. Don't just let my words hit the ceiling, as we say, and fall back to the ground. God, I need to know that you are hearing me right now. I've said prayers like that. I can tell you exact times in my life where I have prayed, God, I need to know you are hearing me.
Yeah. Been there too. Like, you need to hit me over the head this time because I'm there. I need to know this so affirmatively or so concretely that you please just make it apparent. More
than the and thummim, more than a simple, I picked the yes rock. I need to know, God, you are hearing me from your throne room. I love that Psalm 17 that we did a couple of weeks ago, where David says this same thing and then paints that picture of God hearing them and flying to him on the wings. Was it Psalm 17? Yeah. It's just a great, beautiful verse. I thought probably one of the favorites that we've done in this series of when David says, God, I need you to hear me, and God responds with action.
Yeah,
and
powerful illusion of nature responding for God. Yeah.
I think that's kind of what David is saying here. Hear me, hear my prayer, O God. Listen to the words of my mouth. My family in that little Disney cartoon, Little Mermaid, where the seagull grabs Ariel by the ears and shakes her and says, do you hear what I'm trying to say? That gets the point across in my family. And I think that's in essence what David's doing. David's reaching up to God and saying, God, I need to know that you are hearing me. It speaks of his angst. And then he just tells the problem. Strangers are attacking me. Ruthless men seek my life. Men without regard for God. And I think that's kind of where David is finding himself that strangers are attacking me. It's interesting that he's in his hometown.
Yeah.
He's among his family, and he says strangers. These people are people that are part of my family, they're part of my tribe, but I don't know who they are.
Yeah, another translation of that is arrogant people, too. Arrogant people. And when you think back, so in 52 with Doeg, he talks about evil people. Then you go one more, 53 is about the foolish people that deny God.
Right.
And then now we're to the arrogant people.
The arrogant.
So.
Yeah, arrogant, ruthless, people that don't care about really what's going on. They only care about themselves. When you think of ruthlessness, you think they're willing to mow down whatever's in front of them to satisfy their own evil desires. And then the third one are men without regard for God. These are obviously the Ziphites. We know nothing about them other than what is said in a couple of verses, but David sure gives us an expose of who they are. They're strangers, they're arrogant, they're ruthless, they're people without regard for God. They don't give two flips about God being the God of the people of Israel. They only are caring about themselves. And I think David is saying, God, help me.
Yeah. And 53 describes those people. So sometime just, this week, read Psalm 53 right before. It's only 8 verses, or 6 verses. But just go up there and read about the foolish, evil people.
Yeah. And then we get to verse 4. Surely God is my help. The Lord is the one who sustains me. What I see happen up to this point, we've had a prayer. David has been calling out to God, and in my imagery, David pauses, and I think not only does, and you even have the word Salah there, which means a pause, which means the end of a comment. You have an interesting comment. Before I get into mine, you have an interesting comment, which I think goes along with my comment about verse 4. What was your comment about verse 4?
Well, so surely God is my help. The Lord is the one who sustains me. That right there, so we looked at there's 7 verses here. And so the first part, if you want to take it, the A part of the verse, surely God is my help. If we look at that, there's actually, I was reading about Jewish poetry this week. And there are a lot of psalms that fit this model, and I'll flip you back to one here in just a second. But the structural middle of the psalm is actually the main topic of the psalm. And so, help. The Lord is my help. And this whole psalm, if you think about it, he's pleading for vindication. People are attacking him, and it's all about help. If I flip you back to Psalm 100, which is a psalm of praise, and you read that one, it's a simple 5 verses, and we know it well. We read Psalm 100 a lot for praise and worship. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth, and so on. But then when we get there, right in the middle, and so it's the end of verse 3 is the structural middle, and it's about his people. And so his people are the ones that are to give grateful praise. And so I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
So a nice little aside there if you want to get into Hebrew poetry.
No, that's cool. And I think that the point is well made that whether it's David is following Hebrew poetic structure here and pausing in the middle, or he and I will agree with you, but the impact I see is he is praying to God, and then he pauses and he speaks to somebody else.
Yes. Yeah, it's also the break.
He speaks, and so to follow Roger's thought process on Hebrew poetry, it's almost like a narrator praying to God and then pausing and looking out to the audience and saying something very significant. And I think if you look at it that way and just imagine David praying and then pausing, looking around, and I won't even say stand up, but if I stand up, I'll get out of the camera shot. I think literally in my mind, David pauses, he stands up, he puts the tablet down, and he says, surely God is my help.
And he switched gods too.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. Switched God, but he switched forms of God.
Right. He switched forms of God. Surely God is my help. The Lord, there's that Yahweh. The Lord is the one who sustains me. And I think he's making very clear, I'm praying this prayer, but I know the answer to my prayer.
Right.
You know, I am in dire need of God's help in this situation, but as I pray this prayer, I don't want you to think I'm doubting.
Yeah. He went from the divine Lord to the God of Israel. He's being specific, the God of Israel at this point.
Yeah. And saying, I know God is going to answer my prayer. I know He's hearing me. I know His name is going to save me. I know His might is going to vindicate me. But right now, I need an awareness of who God is. I need to know Him in my life in a personal way by now. But don't think that's me doubting. You know, I know He is my help. I know He is the one who sustains me. And I think that's a good word for us. And we're going to come back to that in a minute about how we apply that. But I just want to stop and I say, you know, this significant verse reminds us that in the midst of all the craziness, let's keep in mind that where our help comes from. Let's keep in mind who is the one who truly sustains us on a day-by-day, moment-by-moment basis. I think that's significant to stop and realize. And then in verse 5, let evil recoil on those who slander me, and in your faithfulness, God, destroy them. He's saying, let these evil people reap the results of their evilness. The recoil, almost like when you pull a rubber band and you let it loose, it pops, or you pull a spring and you let it loose, it goes back. And he's saying, let the evil these people are doing pop back on them and wreak havoc in their own life. And then in your faithfulness, interesting David's words, in your faithfulness, destroy them. Not just stop them. Not, you know, slap them on the wrist. You know, not take away their cattle. Just David says, in your faithfulness, God, destroy them. Wipe them off the face of the planet. Yeah. Pretty harsh words.
Yeah. Also, one of the things that I like about this too is David, we've talked about this before, is David never says, in your faithfulness, let me destroy them. Or in your faithfulness, let me have victory. It's always like, God, you know what needs to be done, you do it. I'm not going to put my hand, I am not going to be the judge, you're the judge. Right.
And I think that's pretty significant. And especially in our prayers, I think we can ask God for a lot. David is our model here. That David is just being raw with God. God, I want you to save me. I want you to vindicate me. I want you to hear my prayers. God, I need you to show up. I need you to let these people's evil pop back on them. And God, I just need you to wipe them off. I need you to get rid of them. I won't admit to praying that to somebody, but I can certainly read this psalm and have things in my mind, you know.
Yeah. And that destroy them may not be wipe them from the face of the earth. That destroy them may be maybe just, you know, because they've, those who slander me, in your faithfulness destroy them. In other words, turn it around. Let everyone see that in your faithfulness that I am the righteous one, that I am the one that vindicate me. Just prove my name, in the court, that the judge pronounces, not guilty. These are false charges. And that can be the destroy them also, because you've destroyed their case.
Yeah, I mean, either way. I mean, I think you could take a soft... You can take a soft one or you can take a hard one.
Yeah, I mean, and David's definitely talking, these people are trying to kill him. So he's going hard line, but I'm thinking for today. If
I got you.
Bringing it up to today, which is which way we normally close. I'm bringing a little early close. So,
right. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. And then in verse 6, I will, future tense, I will, despite what you do, God. Despite if you answer my prayer today, or you answer my prayer tomorrow, or you answer my prayer in 5 years, I will sacrifice a free will offering to you. That free will offering, you go throughout the Old Testament, you see There's thank offerings and sin offerings and all different kinds of offerings for all different kinds of things. A free will offering is just, God, I want to give you praise. Just period. No reason, no justification. I just want to sacrifice and give you something because you are God. And I think that's David is saying, no matter what, I'm going to offer up a free will offering to you. I will praise your name, O Lord. There is that personal name of God again. I will praise your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has, again, talking to the people, for he has delivered me from all my troubles, and my eyes have looked on in triumph on my foes. I will sacrifice, I will give you praise because you are good. And I know that you have delivered me from all my troubles in the past. You will do it in the future. My eyes have looked on the triumph of my foes in the past, and that will happen again in the future. Yeah. I think a good closing. So where I want to close with us today is just to ask myself, who are the Ziphites in my life? You know, we all have Ziphites in our life. We all have people in our life, in our families, in where we work, in our communities, in our circle of friends that are willing to say unhealthy things about us. They're willing to do unhealthy things about us. They are willing, in the sense of the Ziphites with Saul, they're willing to sell us out. The common terminology, they're willing to throw us under the bus. They're willing to do things. What is our response to those people in our culture today? And I think you can get some things from this prayer that remind us what we are to do with the Ziphites in our life.
Absolutely.
And I think you just go verse by verse. In closing, real quick. Number one, you pray for vindication and you pray for deliverance. Just as David did. Vindicate me, God, save me. I think when the Ziphites in our lives, whoever they might be, number one, we offer up a prayer of deliverance and vindication. God, you know who I am. You know my heart. These people are saying vile, mean things. You vindicate. I don't need to vindicate myself. I don't need to try to work it out and deliver myself. God, you deliver me. You vindicate me. Second thing we can do is we can ask God to hear our cries for help. God, hear my prayers. God, I need to, as Roger and I have both said, there's nothing wrong with saying, God, I need to know you're hearing me. God, I need to feel your presence in my life today. I think the second thing we can do in dealing with our own Ziphites is ask God to hear our cries for help. I think the third thing we can do in the Ziphites, we can tell God what the problem is. David says, strangers are attacking me. Ruthless men seek my life. Men are out for me that have no regard for God. I think we specifically tell God what's troubling us. God, these people are throwing me under the bus. God, these family members are doing me wrong. God, these people I work with have ill will for me. I think you tell God your troubles. And then number four, I think we remind ourselves and we remind others. We pause in the midst of telling God our troubles, needing to ask, in the midst of all of that, while the Ziphites are active, we need to remind ourselves and remind others of God's care in our life.
That's right.
God has been faithful. God has delivered me. God has so blessed my life. I think we need to be verbal out loud to people and to remind ourselves to count our many blessings, to tell people of the goodness of God. We need to remind people who God is, as David does in verse 4. Surely God is my help. God is the one who sustains me. We remind people and remind ourselves and others of who God is. He is Yahweh. He is I am that I am. I am the one who is with you. I am present with you in this day because of Jesus in our life. And number six, I think we need to remind ourselves and others the ultimate result of evil. Evil will backlash on itself. God will in the end destroy evil. So these Ziphites that are in your life, God will wreak havoc on them. Their evil will recoil on them, and God will have the ultimate say. I think in dealing with the Ziphites in my life, I need to do all of these 6 things and remember what is going on now, and the evil that is seemingly to be winning out is only winning out momentarily, because I have the confidence that ultimately evil recoils upon itself and God is faithful to establish himself. And then number 7, despite what's going on, I give thanksgiving and praise. I will offer a praise offering, a thank offering. I will praise God. I will know that he has delivered me from all my troubles. And I think that's 7 things, and I'll just list them on the screen, how we've talked about them today. In dealing with the Ziphites in my life, I can take Psalm 54 and say, this is how I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it in the same way David did. I'm going to follow these 7 steps and trust that God will fight the battles for me, that I don't need to fight them.
And take a lesson from David. David, always finishes up with our purpose in life is to praise God. You can't praise without being joyful. So find happiness, find joy in God, and in spite of this, all the situations, find happiness, find praise in God, find joy. And I especially too like the part about the sacrifice of a free will offering. Back in Leviticus, the 7th chapter, verse 16 talks about the free will offering, and it's just something above and beyond, something that's not expected, something that's not required, something that you just feel out of your heart that you want to give something extra to God. And that's really cool. I like that.
That's how I think that's, I think it's, I found 7. I didn't stop at 7. I just found 7. I think that's an interesting number. There's 7 verses in this psalm, but I like that it ends that no matter what the Ziphites are doing, give praise to God and give thanksgiving to him. And I think that'll set your heart right, and you'll see the deliverance of God in your life today and throughout your tomorrows. So with that, I want to just say, as we started, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Joy to the world. Jesus is with us, and he came in the form of a baby. He lived his life. He died and was resurrected so that we could have joy, that we could know this personal, intimate relationship with God that David's talking about in Psalms 54. So with that said, be wise, be safe, put a mask on, be safe out there at your Christmas parties, and let's always
be the church.